Hello and welcome to our Quarantine Quiet Time series called Connections with Jesus. My name is Catherine Peckman and I'm excited to continue our series today. I want to give a shout out to Cheryl and Lashana and Olivia. You guys have just done an incredible job at highlighting these interactions with Jesus and helping us to learn from how people were transformed. And I just think it's so powerful that whenever we connect with Jesus, we too leave transformed. So thank you guys for what you've shared. Today we're going to take a look at a guy who had a lot of connections with Jesus, a lot of interactions. Some were great, they were victorious, he gave the right answers, and others he kind of dropped the ball, kind of fumbled a bit, and got rebuked a few times by Jesus. And yet, in the midst of it all, we see how Jesus transformed someone who is kind of overzealous, spoke without thinking, very emotional, yet very devoted. And he harnessed that devotion and zeal and turned him into the rock. We're talking about Peter, the guy who ended up going on to preach the first sermon, begin Jesus' church, an incredible testimony of what a repeated and a kind of daily connection with Jesus, how that can transform us. Very cool. So we're going to take a look at Peter and when he walks on water with Jesus. So we're going to open up our Bibles to Matthew chapter 14. And this story happens, it comes right after John the Baptist has been beheaded, which in a lot of ways was a shock and a discouragement for the disciples, I'm sure. In a lot of ways, John the Baptist started Jesus' ministry. Jesus was connected with him pretty much from the moment they were conceived. So kind of a wild thing to have happened. And the disciples were discouraged, so they go off to grieve and pray, and what they find is a crowd of hungry people. It says there were 5,000 men, which means there were probably a lot of other women and children there as well. And while the disciples are feeling like, we've got nothing, Jesus tells them, no, you do. And he stretches their few resources. He stretches their faith. He stretches their fish and loaves, stretches their love and compassion, and they end up feeding the 5,000 and have more to spare. Really cool story. And then we pick it up in verse 22, we see what Jesus does with them next. It says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. Now I have to imagine that, I don't know, I do think Jesus had a sense of humor, and he probably was laughing at his guys for being afraid because it says they cried out. Can you imagine 12 grown men crying out in fear? Like, ah! Anyway, okay. Verse 27, but Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it's I, don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come out to you on the water. So this just shows us Peter's relationship with Jesus. He puts Jesus to the test, and Jesus responds in kind. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me! Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, he said. Why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. So this is a pretty cool story, and I really love seeing Peter and Jesus' relationship because in every connection and interaction that Jesus and Peter have, they kind of have, I see the most back and forth between the two of them, where Jesus says one thing, Peter says another, and they kind of go back and forth with each other. And I love this back and forth that Peter puts Jesus to the test and Jesus challenges him right back. Okay, come. But I want to talk about the disciples for a minute, because I think that at this point, they've gone through a lot. It says that Jesus is walking to them at dawn. So in one day, they heard that John the Baptist had died. They're trying to grieve, and then they're caught by a crowd. And then they go out to the boat, and what do they have on the lake but a ton of wind and waves? So the boat's probably super rocking, and the sea is really choppy. And so these poor guys just can't catch a break. And honestly, when I thought about it, I think that that's kind of the position we're in this quarantine. I think a lot of us have suffered loss, whether it's the loss of a job, whether it's the loss of a loved one, the loss of a dream. I know that many of our students have been feeling discouraged as some of their schools are now going online even for their fall semester. And we're just kind of saying goodbye to a lot of things. Goodbye to the summer. Goodbye to our traveling plans. Goodbye to the World Discipleship Summit. Like, a lot of things are being taken away. And just when we think we're going to have time to say goodbye to all of it, now we're faced with kind of the demanding needs of our own home. I personally have felt stretched in a lot of ways. Being here at home with our 3 young kids, I have really needed to depend a lot on Jesus. Like, okay, Jesus, I've got about 3 more minutes of patience and 5 more minutes of grace. And I see how Jesus extends it and stretches it. And while that has been really encouraging and faith building, it has also been exhausting. And so I relate to these guys being on the boat, wanting rest. And yet here we are, there's still wind, there's still waves, and I have to imagine that these guys are feeling a little delirious and tired, and it makes sense that when they look on the water, they don't see Jesus. What they see instead is a ghost. And I don't know about you, but kind of hearing how long, every month that goes by, every week that goes by, I feel like more anxiety and more fear and more worry is introduced rather than more peace, more contentment, more security and stability. And so I feel like I can look out at the waves and the wind, and instead of seeing Jesus, I am seeing things that I'm more scared of. Like, gosh, what if my kids don't get to go back to school for another year? Gosh, what if I end up homeschooling them for a lot longer than I thought? What if I don't ever get to meet any of you guys for another year? I'm kind of projecting my fears onto the situation rather than seeing the one who can actually save me, right? And so then it makes sense that then Peter has the guts to then challenge Jesus and say, if it's really you, call me out on the water with you. And Jesus wants him to believe. Jesus wants him to have faith. And so he says, come. So then Peter has this exhilarating moment where he's walking on the water towards Jesus. Can you imagine walking on stormy waters? Maybe, I don't know if he literally was climbing up the waves or if the water was splashing against him. I have no idea. But either way, I kind of picture it like Elsa running on the water. I'm watching a lot of Frozen with my kids. But I imagine it like just him confidently running across the water towards Jesus. And the pure excitement of getting to do something like that. But then he gets distracted. And he remembers, oh, wait a minute. What about the wind? What about the waves? What about this storm that we're in? And again, he slips back into seeing not his Savior, not the one who can grab him and bring him through anything, but instead he sees fear. And because of his fear, he falls. And that is true of pretty much every time I've been afraid, I have fallen. And we're teaching our kids to ride their bikes right now, and 2 of our kids have now started riding 2-wheel bikes. Our 3rd is a little too young. But we just got him a bike with training wheels. It was wonderful. But anyway, one of our kids is more given to fear. So we're teaching them to ride their bike, and we're telling this kid, like, you got this, bud, like, you can do this, and just keep going, don't be afraid, don't look down. And that's exactly what Jesus says to his disciples. And one of our kids, they have kind of stumbled through some of their turns, stumbled through some of their bike riding lessons, and they can get discouraged. And when Jesus says this to Peter, you have little faith, why did you doubt? I really don't believe he was saying it in a condescending way, like, how dare you doubt? I really believe he was saying, why didn't you just keep your eyes on me? You know I'm here for you. You know I can help you through anything. Because that's the heart that we have with our kids when they're riding their bikes. Why didn't just keep your eyes on me? You can get through anything if your focus is on me. And in saying this to Peter, what he did was he calmed Peter's inner storm. The storm that Jesus wants to calm for all of us is not the storm of what's going on around us. It's not our circumstances. Jesus doesn't want to just take away the coronavirus and have everything go back to normal. Jesus wants us to grow in this time. He wants our faith to rest in him. And I love how in this moment with Peter, as soon as Peter cried out, it says immediately Jesus grabbed his hand and pulled him up. Jesus wasn't, I do think that Jesus was kind of waiting for Peter, call out to me. And as soon as Peter did that, Jesus was right there. So how often are we calling out to Jesus? Are you afraid? Are you worried? Do you doubt? If you do, call out to Jesus. Let him reinstate you, just like he reinstates Peter by saying, why did you doubt? Because in asking that question, he reminds Peter who his focus should be on. Our focus should not be on the wind. Our focus should not be on the waves. Our focus needs to be on Jesus, because once it's on Jesus, that's when we don't get taken over by the wind and the waves, but we can actually have mastery over them. Just as Jesus is the Son of God and he's the Lord of the wind and the waves, he is the Lord of this storm of the coronavirus, of COVID-19. And no matter what effect that might be having on your life, Jesus can give you victory. You don't have to be undertaken by the effects of this bug. You can actually have mastery over it if you walk hand in hand with Jesus. So guys, let's let our faith grow. I just feel inspired thinking about how Peter must have felt humbled, but also like this was a victory. He walked on water. So let's walk on water with Jesus. Let's be humbled by our circumstances, but let's let our faith grow as we walk with Jesus this week. Love you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Oh, and please subscribe. Sorry. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, because this is our church community right now. So love you guys. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye.